morning, good afternoon, should I say. We're live from Ottawa, and we're at the Outcomes Finance Summit. I'm with Jeff Cyr. Jeff, you are managing partner for Raven Indigenous Capital Partners.
Yes.
Good. So today we're going to talk about Outcomes Finance. What is Outcomes Finance?
Outcomes Finance is a social finance tool that we use to solve complex problems really in communities. And the way that it works, very simply put, the way that it works is you work with community to set the outcomes they want to achieve, usually in a program or service or climate change initiative. And then you go to government and say, do you want to buy this outcome? And you get into an outcomes contract. But what we do is we bring in private capital up front to take the risk, to take all the innovation, and then you only pay for the successful indicators. So it's an outcomes-based model where you're setting your outcomes in advance, but you're really empowering the community to own the intervention, to own the change that they want to make. Because the fundamental belief is that the community knows how to solve the problem because they're the ones facing the problem. And it allows you to really nuance and make bespoke programs and services that kind of meet the human need. So it's a financing tool really about doing innovation for programs and services, and it's just how you move the money to empower the community. One of the great byproducts of this is that it allows government to actually get to better outcomes. It's a better use of taxpayer dollar as well throughout the process, which can only benefit us all at the end of the day. So that's what it is, simply put.
So we're switching from aiming for output to outcomes.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's a solution to what problem? What problem are you addressing with this tool?
I mean, generally can be applied. It's just a tool, so it can be applied in a bunch of situations. It's not perfect for every situation, but it can address a lot of what we would call human service gaps, where things are being missed, or we're just not making progress with the way certain things are structured. And you can take things that we know, homelessness and housing, sort of environmental progress in hard to reach communities, recidivism, child and family services, getting better educational outcomes in underserved communities. So you would use this tool in these cases to build with communities which have been historically underserved or aren't progressing, in a similar way, don't have access to funds as what we would call maybe the mainstream population of parts of Canada. So you can use the tool to actually get at different issue areas in a really good way that, like I said before, empowers the community to own it, the initiative as well. One of the distinct things that we do at Raven that is really important is the community itself. Before you talk about money, you make sure that you go into the community and they have a chance to articulate their priorities and what they need to see success. Because, as you can imagine, those from the outside of the community bring the funding in don't really know. It's fair that they don't really know, and it's one size fits all programming and funding solutions haven't really worked.
Let's go with an example. We have a nice chart behind with a geothermal solution.
Right.
So tell me about this project. Who was in the project and who gained what from this project?
Sure. So the first thing is, the first one of these we did, this outcomes contract in communities, was Peguis First Nation and Fisher River First Nation, Southern Manitoba First Nations, who identified to themselves what they wanted to do for the community. And they wanted Indigenous energy sovereignty, right? The government doesn't necessarily fund Indigenous energy sovereignty per se. It's not how it's constructed. The other partner inside this was Aki Energy, an Indigenous-owned social enterprise who installs geothermal systems in communities. They've been doing some of this, and then run across a policy problem, and they came to us and said, hey, can you help facilitate a different way of doing this? And we said, well, let's try an outcomes financing-based method. And here we have the Government of Canada through Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation and Efficiency Manitoba, so a provincial and a federal entity, both agreeing to buy outcomes. They both bring their money together, and we structure it for them. So the community decided we want geothermal units. Aki Energy has the expertise and is a community-owned enterprise. Raven raises the money from private capital providers, funds, foundations, investors, and the government agrees that if you are successful in installing these geothermal units, X period of time, with the contract, then we're going to repay those investors with a rate of return on it.
Okay.
So everyone's kind of getting what they need.
What was the rate of return?
4%.
4%.
It's
So
quite low.
let's be clear. So the government money will be used to pay the investors, the return to the investor, and the investor's money is used to make the project.
To upfront the capital cost of the project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what does the government gain from a project like this?
Yeah, so I mean, usually what government pays for, you said it before, it pays for outputs or activities. And it doesn't really allow the space for a lot of innovation to occur. So what the government gains is sort of, we know at the beginning what are our outcomes we're trying to achieve. And they sit as a partner and say, yes, we want to install X many systems and this much, pay this much for it. Everything is kind of in a box and they know how it's going to happen. But Raven and Aki and the communities build a partnership to get greater facilitation on this. The way that government traditionally works in this space is house by house. As an individual, you have to apply to do this. So you're not getting good execution at bulk on the ground. Also, the government traditionally doesn't, between the two jurisdictions, don't work that well. They don't combine their funding easily, not all the time, but easily, to get, like, to really do more homes, to get a better reduction of GHG footprint and energy savings. The other thing the government gets, the byproduct of this method, is you get to train folks who run social assistance, bring them off social assistance. They get HVAC level jobs, which are, you know, high-end jobs that you can take to other, even after this project's done, you can take this elsewhere. And the long-term cost savings to the system of reduced energy bills and the housing resiliency, because the house gets more resilient. You get to extend the life of the housing stock, which is a big problem in Canada. And so the government gains all kinds of sundry benefits to how that money is used, and they gain the efficiencies of doing it under a bulk outcomes contract. We did this one that you see behind you, and we've just inked the deal on another. So now we're moving at scale. So the opportunity here is to do a lot more and to do it quicker. And you're empowering Indigenous people to do it in communities, which is going to only be good for everybody.
And this morning we talked about the velocity of capital that has to be increased, that underground there's no velocity of capital. So what's the impulse of the investor? Why would they want to invest in outcomes finance?
Sure. Different investors, different reasons what motivates them, of course. Investors are, at least in my experience, looking for vehicles to put their money into to do social good. They're also looking for vehicles that actually propel social change broadly to the system, right? So, like, the investors aren't just there for profit. That has been changing.
Even private investors. We're not talking.
I'm talking about private investors.
Okay, good.
So if they can get preservation of their capital, they can keep the capital and earn some interest. And 4% is not great, but in this market, it's not bad either, right? And so, and in our new fund, we're going to kind of look at 5 to 7% is what we're promising to investors. They get, you know, there are a lot. I mean, people think of finance as cutthroat finance. They're not all like that. We are investors as well at Raven. We are not like that. Profit is one motive, but we're using capitalism to do good. And to be honest, we need to bring way more private capital into the space. That's been happening. There's another advantage, though, I want to mention to private capital being in there. Private capital looks for efficiencies, due diligence. You know, it's held accountable because they themselves are investors of other folks' money, right? So they bring that sort of structure, and then the replicability kind of emerges from it as well. So we're taking the best of private capital, I would say, with the best of government procurement, we hope, and the best of community solutions, and kind of packaging it up and kind of making the velocity of this change kind of work in a good way. And maybe I answered your question.
Let's talk about this fall. This fall, Raven goes with a different approach. It launched a fund, correct?
Yes.
Tell me about that one. How different? What are you doing differently about that?
Right. So before on these contracts like this one, we went out project by project and raised the investment capital to do it, and that's time consuming, first of all, and that means you can do less projects. So what we decided to do is we were seeing so much interest from communities and so much interest from investors. So why don't we package this into a fund? Raven knows how to manage funds. Let's put it into a fund. A couple things happen in a fund. One is, you stop all that wasted energy of raising capital because you just do it all at once.
Mhm.
And you invest it in X number of projects over the life of the fund. Two is you gain expertise and efficiencies because these things can take a little while they take a little bit longer than a traditional investment. You got to do some groundwork, work with communities, do all that sort of work. But we gain efficiency inside a fund. We have this ability to concentrate, and we learn. Our skill sets improve, and our ability to interact and to do these transactions becomes more efficient, and it becomes cheaper. The more we do it, we understand the legal vehicles and the things required, and we can do this faster.
But one question comes to my mind. You have one fund, but you still have multiple contracts.
Yeah.
So if I invest in that fund, suppose I become very rich and I become a private investor, I will invest in the fund. I will invest in one contract.
No, you invest in the fund.
Yes.
And the fund, our projection is this fund will have 5 to 7 contracts in it.
Okay.
Some will be in the health area, particularly.
But I won't choose
You
the
don't
contract.
get to choose.
But there will be contracts for each project.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that's actually like a regular fund.
Okay.
So if you invest in a regular private equity venture capital fund as an investor, you don't get to choose what to invest in. Matter of fact, you don't even know what will come inside
But
the
now
fund.
with the outcomes finance, there's this emotional tie. So I won't be able to choose if it goes to health initiative or a climate initiative.
If that was the case, we just make a specialized fund just to do one or the other. Right now, we have efficiencies. We have outcomes contracts that have emerged and we've been working on for a while that lends itself to a fund very easily. But it's very complicated for us if we have to split investors in the middle.
And you think there will be an appetite for a fund rather than an emotional relationship with this project or another project?
Yeah, indeed. And all evidence, and we are raising capital now for the fund, is that there's lots of interest.
Okay.
And that interest comes from different investment sectors, like different asset holders is what I mean. So high net worth individuals, family foundations and public foundation offices, investment funds themselves, like funds have, so we call it a fund-to-fund approach. So other funds say, how do I invest in the climate or the health space in a really efficient way by a fund manager? So that's how it works. And so you don't get to choose. It'd be very complicated if you get to choose inside a fund.
So it's the new approach. The fund is the new approach.
The fund itself is the new approach.
Okay. And later today, there will be an announcement. Can you tell me a bit about that? What it's all about?
Yeah. Should I? Could I?
I think you should.
All right. So Canada, a couple of years ago, got very smart, government, and created the Social Finance Fund.
Correct.
Okay. It's a catalytic fund designed to build investment in the social finance ecosystem. And so that has now been out with 3 fund managers in Canada to start making investments. None have been announced until today. So today, we will be the first investment from Boan Social Impact. It's an anchor investment of approximately $10 million into the Outcomes Fund. And it is game-changing for the ecosystem. It's game-changing for us. And it de-risks other money from coming in, right? So it says, yes, this is where we want to be. And other investors can come in and feel that confidence. We think it's particularly important for Indigenous people to see this sort of change. And so that's going to come out a little bit today in the conference. Someone will probably get upset at me for saying it now. And there'll be a press release on it. I'm sure that comes out shortly thereafter today. But we're very excited to get to this point in Canada where we have this sort of inflection point.
Well, congrats. So you heard it first. Raven will have an investment, $10 million investment from Boan from the Social Finance Fund. Well, thank you very much, Jeff, for this conversation.
Thank you.